What's up, guys? Larry Chen here. Welcome to another episode of Hoonigan Autofocus. We're here at Irwindale Speedway. This is pre-long season testing, right? No. Yep. Long off season, extended off season.
Yeah, extended off season testing, which is kind of cool. At the same time, I'm like really nervous about the fact that we should already be halfway through the season and we're here preseason testing. It just doesn't feel right at all.
Yeah, well, it's good to see you. It's good to see people's faces.
It's good to see you, man.
Yeah, and you know, the fun thing for me, when you first started competing in Formula Drift, you brought like a different driving style. Like you did a lot of left foot braking, and it's something that I've never ever seen before in drifting, and I think a lot of the competitors never really saw that before. In fact, it's probably more difficult for a lot of the guys to drive against you.
Yeah, I felt like my momentum and speed was the same as a lot of the other cars, but you know, I started out with like a car that was making 330 wheel horsepower, and that meant I have to just drive with my right foot fully floored, and where I can, I could like left foot brake just to slow it down enough, but honestly, it usually wasn't slowing the car down. It was keeping the wheel speed in the rear as high as possible with that low of horsepower. It was basically safer than getting off throttle, pulling the handbrake, clutching back down. It was just ensuring that basically I have the little bit of power on tap all the time. And I got used to it. I drove like that before drifting, you know, and other disciplines of driving, and it felt natural to apply it in drifting.
It's kind of fun for me now because after you kind of brought that style, a lot of other drivers have adopted that. And it's so often where I get a panning shot of these guys going along a bank, and the front tires are completely not moving at all, and the rears are moving like at 100 mile per hour wheel speed.
Yeah, and you know, some of the guys that have like kind of strange front geometry, like steering geometry, they're kind of at a disadvantage, right? You see their front wheels stopping, but that's because their front wheel's already pretty much off the ground, and the slightest little tap of the brake will just stop it completely, and it'll throw smoke because it's literally standing still as it's gliding across the concrete. So if a car has good front grip, they have like meaty tires and like really symmetrical front end geometry at angle, you don't see that front wheel locking up as much. So what I'm trying to say is a lot of drivers are doing it. It's more noticeable in some cars than the others, and I think that was one of the reasons we got rid of the front LED brake light, because everyone was doing things that suit their driving style, and it was kind of getting to a point where you can't just because you see a brake light on, you can't really say that that guy's going slower. In fact, sometimes they're going faster, you know, even though the brake light's on.
Because the thing is, what people don't realize, people that don't follow drifting, inside the cockpit, you are so busy. Like you are using all of your limbs all the time to do things, to grab,
definitely,
you know, e-brake, shifting, the steering's going crazy. Plus, I don't know if you slip the clutch, but I've seen, you know, a couple drivers.
I love abusing my clutch. It's like, it's one of the most fun things of driving these drift cars is that you have all these controls at your fingertips and you could just use all of them, and slipping the clutch is just so much fun, especially when you're putting down a lot of power. You don't want that power just on, off. It's so fun abusing and beating the crap out of these cars.
I just love the micro management of like just all the little things that you're doing to keep this thing sideways. But part of this, like you learned a lot of this stuff also because you have your own suspension company, correct?
Yeah, it made me not lose focus of proper car setup. You know, when I started drifting, I didn't really know how a drift car should be set up, and it kind of made me hyper-focus on what's right, what's wrong. And then I learned there's not really too much rights or wrongs in drifting. Every car is set up so differently. You know, you see cars that are three-wheel motion all around the bank, and you see cars that look very planted. So it made me dig a little deeper into it and explore car setup, and it's helped my company, Fuel Suspension, tremendously, because we're able to create coilover settings that don't work for other disciplines. And because I dove so hard into the drifting world, it allowed us to just fine-tune that offering and have it out there. So also helps competing against the other guys that are at the mercy of a suspension company setting it up to them based off of their feedback. So I give my own feedback to myself and go back to the shop and nerd out.
So, and with that said, a couple other teams actually run your suspension, right?
They do. So, you know, the biggest accomplishment as far as sponsoring top drivers was sponsoring James and Peter. And, you know, James, we sponsored him when he was winning in Europe, so we got some championships under our belt. He came out here. We built really good setup for him, and he came out here and won the championship. Peter did amazing. That's really good feedback for us as a suspension company, and it's good feedback for me as a driver too. I run a very similar chassis, an S14, now an S15. They're both, it's the same car, you know, realistically.
That's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today.
Yeah.
You are, this is what I love about Formula Drift. It's like a world-class series, right? But
I would say so, for
but
sure.
But there's still people like yourself, privateers, that you're building your own car from the ground up during the off season, and like you came up from this. You've been driving this for a couple years, or how many years have you been driving this chassis?
This car came out at the very end of 2012. I actually had to build it mid-season because I totaled my other S14. So yeah, it's been around for a long time. This is the lifespan, this is a little over the average lifespan, I feel like, of a Formula Drift car. So it was very good time to build a new car, for sure.
Okay, so then you actually built an S15 during the off season. Yeah. If you could kind of just show me some things that you've done on this car. I mean,
sure.
So there's a lot of S chassis out there, but you know, you build it for yourself. You're not building it for someone else to drive. Yeah. So there's just so many things that you've learned over the years competing as a winning driver in Formula Drift to kind of make it your own. So let's start at the front then.
Yeah, let's do it. So I actually have the bumper removed, which is great for you guys. So on this car, the focus was shifting weight away from the front and not hang it off the back of the car, but shift it to a centralized region in the car. So everything on the front of the car, like including the bash bar, is like super thin chromoly, like high grade metal, but super lightweight and super thin. And even the engine is pushed a lot further back than my previous car, which means the transmission's further back, the seating position's further back. But before we get too far away from the front end, cool.
So the audience, Hoonigan Autofocus, we're focusing on autos, obviously, but part of it is that it's the little things that make you excited, that you nerd out on.
Too much sometimes, but hey.
That get us excited, that actually personally gets me excited. Wow, okay. Already, even like the simplest things, like you were saying about reducing weight in the front, even not using OEM.
All these things add up to so much. Like at the end of the day, doing all these little things allows you to shift, like, I think this car is like over 100 pounds of weight that we somehow magically shifted away from the front to the rear of the car, which seems like, how am I gonna pull that off? But it's because of all these little things. So yeah, this is a 326 power Japanese lens, super lightweight. We don't want to run the full headlight because it's heavy, with a really cheap and disposable LED lightweight light.
It's something so silly like this it's just, I mean, I've never seen it in another Formula Drift car, like fake lenses.
So I started doing this when I ran do you remember the Hyundai Genesis Coupe?
Yeah.
That thing was super heavy, and I was really pulling my hair out trying to get weight out of the car, and I realized those factory headlights were super, super heavy. They had like all kinds of heavy materials inside of them. I don't know why, but so we did that on that car. It helped out a lot, and I was like, well, every little bit counts. I'm just gonna do the same thing on my S chassis. And yeah, the headlight's the most obvious one, but even like this tube structure here, usually we run like 095 like tubing that's pretty thick, the same thickness as the roll cage. Not on this car. It's not mandated by the rule book that we have to run a minimum thickness on any of this front tube structure, so I didn't. I went super thin, but I stepped up in the material quality, so like the strength is really the same. It's just, if you add up all the small things like that you're doing, it really pays off.
Because in essence, like a lot of traditional race cars, potentially, it doesn't matter where you remove the weight, and it doesn't matter where you position it, or potentially you want lower center of gravity.
Always,
all
yeah.
of that. But with a drift car, because you're like pivoting on the center axis of the car, it's like, it's easy, it's actually better, it's easier to transition if all the stuff is more to the center.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think what you're getting to is like, we don't want polar weight, and polar weight hanging off the in front of the front axles and behind the rear axles, because then you have a swinging pendulum and it's harder to go from crazy angle in one direction to crazy angle in the other direction. It literally just physically takes longer for it to switch from one side to the other because you're carrying more mass, more momentum swinging. So yeah, definitely trying to get rid of that. And this car, I think we did it, put it in on the scales. It's like actually 50-50 weight distribution, and there's not much weight hanging off the either end of the axle. So very happy about that part.
So in terms of motor package, how different is it versus the S14?
It's very similar in the sense that it's still a 427 cubic inch, GM based, it's an LS based V8, even though there's really nothing GM about this motor. The block's aftermarket, the heads are aftermarket. We did switch engine builders. This year I'm running a Texas Speed motor. They have a different cylinder head package. What else? I am running a Crowler valve train. That car I was running Jezel. Really happy about getting on the Crowler racing stuff. It's very solid, and I think it's just supposed to be more durable. So in essence, the engine's very similar. Texas Speed just had their own kind of formula of building the same size of motor by using the Crowler valve train that is steel versus aluminum. So I'm hoping that this is actually a very durable setup. And I'm very abusive on high RPM rev limiter, so I'm happy about that move. They have their own secret sauce, like camshaft and stuff like that. So changing the engine builder is a big deal, right? Because you want to stick with something that is tried and true, and it was a bit of almost a gamble to change, but I'm really happy we did that. I got really good support from them. So yeah, Texas Speed 427 cubic inch, LS-based motor, aftermarket block, aftermarket heads. The only thing that's OEM on this motor really is the GM intake manifold. We're using an LS7 intake manifold because the nature of the supercharger and the RPM range that we want horsepower to come in at, this was really the best option. There's really cool intake manifolds that make more power than this, but then you suffer on low-end power, sometimes mid-range power, and that's not where you want to be with drifting. You want to have power basically from low RPM all the way till the top, so you got to really be careful about what parts you choose.
This is honestly one of my favorite parts of drifting. I'm sure it's one of your favorites too. The fact that pretty much all of these cars, like Chris's car, Rome's car, Rad Dan, just so many different, Dai's car even, Turbo, LS. There's just
one power outer is not enough in drifting. That's why you have nitrous on top of all this.
Yeah.
So like,
but the point is that it's all different.
Oh yeah,
motor packages.
Yep. Yeah,
it doesn't matter, like how you make the power. You just have to make the power, and whatever works for you, whatever you're used to. So like, I mean, this is supercharged.
Yeah, this is a Vortec YSI blower. It's one of the big boy units that Vortec makes, but we want big power, so we run a big blower. If we are lacking low-end power at any given part of the track, that's why we have nitrous. So even though the supercharger is big, just like the guys that run a really big turbo and they're starting to desire more low-end torque, we spray nitrous at it. At this, I think we're spraying at as low as 2,400 RPM just to wake this thing up and get it into the power band.
Okay, so, and then have they dynoed this package? Yeah. Or have you dynoed this?
Well, I dynoed it after putting the car, so it's only been on chassis dynos. It makes a conservative 900 to the wheels, and we can go with a lot more nitrous. I could up the boost, but honestly 900 for me is like, I'm happy. As long as I get close to 900 of actual foot-pounds of torque out of the motor, then I'm super happy. I kind of don't look at the horsepower numbers so much, I look at torque, and I feel like 900 is good. I've dabbled with running a little bit more nitrous at a track, and it definitely increased the power. I'm not sure to what, because we obviously didn't have a dyno with us, but it was a little bit harder to stay smooth. It was flashing the tires really rapidly, and it was just kind of hard to keep it in the proper line. So I'm happy with where it's at.
Tell me a little bit about the front suspension setup here.
Front suspension is the Weissfab V2 angle kit that is an off-the-shelf kit. We are running Feel coilovers, because that's my brand, and they are the three-way adjustable, so it's Feel 443. So what makes a coilover three-way adjustable is we have rebound adjustability here at the top, like most coilovers that you're used to seeing, but also we have this reservoir that is mounted remotely of the shock. On this reservoir, we have a high speed and a low speed knob, which is all at the bottom. And that really helps you fine tune the car, because sometimes you really are happy with the way it's handling, but you don't want it to bottom out over a huge dip coming off the bank, say like in Orlando or Jersey last season. And that's where these coilovers really allow you to fine tune where you want the car to be softer, where you want it to be stiffer. You just got to know what you're doing. There's a lot of knobs to turn. You could really mess up the baseline tune, as you want to call it, if you just go overboard with the knobs. So
let's check out the rear of the car, which I love this. This is like a very rally.
Yeah. I saw Tanner using this on his cars, and I thought it was just such a good idea. Because like rally, we have, instead of silt, like in rally you have silt come inside the car. When you have windows and everything in, it finds little cracks in the chassis and starts to go inside of the chassis. We have smoke being the same hindrance, so this introduces some positive cabin pressure because I have windows everywhere, so I need a little bit of air being forced in. If you have a higher pressure inside the cabin than outside, there's no way smoke's gonna enter inside, because it doesn't go from low pressure to high pressure, it does the opposite. So
yeah, it's cool. I could spot your car from really far away because both of them.
The back is very similar to my S14. It has basically radium set up for the fuel system inside of a fuel-safe fuel cell. Still new, still needs to be slapped in the wall a few times. So yeah, Cybon trunk lid that's really nice and lightweight and durable. And yeah, it's radiator in the back because we were trying to shift the weight, and we're already doing that on the S14. But here I basically redid the bash bars and the whole structure back here a little differently on this car. It's a little bit more sturdy, and I really think it's just easier to work on. I made it so it's kind of like Legos. Like if you gotta swap parts really fast, everything comes out easily. The S14, similar parts are in similar locations, but that car has been redesigned year after year, and when you kind of do things and change them year after year, things just don't end up being so clean and not as easy to work on. So this was engineered from scratch to be the way it is right now. So we got an APQ sump back there because I am simple. I don't run a dry sump. I actually use a wet sump with an APQ sump. It's been working great on my cars so far, so I'm just gonna keep running it. It's a very simple system, and it's very cost effective.
Yeah, sometimes if it's just too crazy. So one of the main things that I noticed right away on your car is the two batteries hung upside down here.
Yeah.
That's it's a pretty cool setup. Is it just pretty much to get more weight?
Exactly,
right
exactly. So per the Formula Drift rulebook, you're only allowed to add 50 pounds of weight ballast, meaning that you could only have like 50 pounds of dumb weight. That's not doing anything. So those batteries are about 45 to 48 pounds each. And if I'm using it connected, if it's actually a working circuit in the car, it's not weight ballast. So it's not only kind of a loophole, I guess, in the system, but if we have any problems with the alternator, we can make probably a whole nother lap without an alternator because we have two batteries instead of one. So it serves many purposes. These cars run so much electronics deep down, the nitrous bottle heater, two really high efficiency fans, two high pressure fuel pumps, one lift pump. It just adds up. Having two batteries is taking some of the peaks in amperage and really taking some load off of the alternator. So underneath we got a Winner's quick change, and it's the RTS 1000 unit, so it could handle a ton of power. Got drive shaft shop axles, Weissfab rear kit, which helps the suspension geometry stay very true through the full stroke of the suspension, and it's super adjustable. You can make it so on squat the car is just parallel, like wheels are moving parallel. You can make it so toes in. You can even make it so toes out under squat. It's like you can do anything you want, which I need that kind of stuff because I like to tinker. And it's very lightweight, so you have a lot less unsprung weight, so that's what gives you that good launch and really good forward bite. Other than that, everything's obviously cut out except for fiberglass rear quarter panels. These are 2F Performance rear quarters.
This is same theme, like this whole thing is like super lightweight.
It is, and it's literally just, it's meant to be replaceable. Yeah, we don't want to have to cut a quarter panel and re-weld it and patch it. If we crash the car, we want to unbolted with the few bolts that it's got on there, throw it away and put a new panel on it. And that's exactly why this is built like this, and a lot of these cars are done the same way. What I do a little different is, this usually is like one piece here. I purposely cut the center out because if I ride a wall and I get into it on one corner, I want this corner to get damaged and I don't want it to skew this side at all. So that's why you see this gap. It looks kind of funny, but it's definitely serving a purpose.
I like this though. Like, this is here for a reason, so it actually saves the car.
Yeah, it's here for two reasons. If I get rear-ended, I don't want people getting too far into my car, and secondly, per the rule book, now we have to have this rear structure that comes out basically to the rear bumper cover. Before, we didn't have to have it, so some guys were running like a very hollow rear end of the car, but it just makes it a little bit safer, and the like show goes on faster, because if someone runs into another car, hopefully they're not damaging the radiator, the fans and stuff like that. Now there's a structure, they bump and keep going with the show. So,
all right, last thing, let's check out the interior real quick.
All right, Larry, this is my favorite freaking part of the car.
This is a beautiful interior. Oh my God.
I think it still has it. There's like a new car smell, I swear. I think it's because the paint, the brand new Cobra seats, like it just smelled like fresh in here, like plastic, you know? Carbon fiber dash. This dash was made in Siberia, in Russia, by Monster Service. Those guys are super talented. It's like super lightweight. Everything here is like very ergonomic. So I set everything up meticulously so it fits me. The seating position in this car is over 5 inches further back than my other car for the weight distribution. I went with an OBP pedal box so that way I could position it exactly where I want it. We geeked out and put, grip tape on all the pedals because there were times where my foot would slip off and my spotter was like, hey, what happened on that run? And I'd give him the excuse that my foot slipped off the pedal, so I don't want that to happen again. Just all these little fine details that I implemented in this car. Went with an aftermarket steering column that's lightweight. It's also telescoping, so that way if anything happens, like it actually collapses a little bit instead of this going into your chest. So I definitely was selective and careful, and I spent a lot of time and money on this interior, and I really like it. We went with a solid state electronic system. There's no real relays. It's all basically this switch panel controls everything in the car. There's two PDMs back there that control the fans, the fuel pumps, the nitrous system. Like, it's all programmed to do what it needs to do instead of having manual relays clicking things on and off. So there was a lot to learn about everything here, because everything here to me is very new, and I love sitting in here. Before I even drove the car, I spent like a lot of time just getting in and out and just appreciating the way everything's laid out.
And this is just comes from years of building your own car. I mean, did you built your own cage too?
The cage was built at my shop, but I hired a guy to come in that I trusted very well. He's built a ton of off-road trucks that are running to this day, and he was an instructor at the fab school a while ago too, so I trusted him to build a cage. But I was there asking him, hey, can we tuck this as close as possible? Can we run this as high as possible? And I think I pushed this guy really hard, because I've never seen a cage tucked up so much in an S chassis. I mean, you could see little corners that are welded to the actual chassis, because that's how tight everything is. It's just
really good job. This area back here is super neat too.
Yeah,
I love all of the fab work that you guys did.
Yeah, it's a firewall that we built at my shop, and it really keeps the car clean, but it keeps a lot of usable space back here. Some people put a firewall right behind the seats. I kind of wanted this interior space. I wanted nice clean space for all the electronics and stuff to stay inside the car.
The door bars, everything is just so neat, and it looks like it's like really like right on the doors too.
Yep. So we got these door panels from Europe, from Lithuania, from a company called LW Performance, that stands for Lightweight Performance. I put the doors on, and then we literally built the cage around the doors and around my seating position. So when the door panels were in, we ran the door bars as close to the panel as possible to give myself as much room Because really, honestly, having door bars that come out to the max gives you that sensation that you have more interior room, and just makes you more comfortable, and it makes me feel safer inside the car, because if I get hit, I want to have some buffer between the door bar and myself. So.
Wow. Last thing, this tunnel here. So you had to build this to actually fit the transmission?
Yeah, so this whole tunnel, literally right from this weld forward, is aftermarket. We've cut the whole tunnel out of the car, and we built this, sheet metal tunnel. You can see all these brakes that we put in a sheet metal brake to get the shape of it right. The transmission is scooted so far back in this car that we had to build this crazy bezel, because the shifter is pretty tall, so the further you scoot it back, the more it pokes out, because the tunnel naturally slants down, and now you're sticking the transmission further back, so it's going really high. So this is kind of a different bezel for me. I've never thought that I'd have to build one that actually comes up so high, but it ended up turning out really good. This is a new thing for this year. It has to be an SFI approved shift boot cover, meaning that's like flame retardant, which is a good move. It's just making the cars safer, but it was one of those things we had to consider in the build. So overall, everything turned out, I think, really good, and this thing's really comfortable and just fun to be inside of and drive.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for spending your time and showing us all the little details on this car. We cannot wait to see you shred. I definitely can't wait to see you shred. It's so enjoyable to watch you drive every single time. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for the interview, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for highlighting my car. It's been a lot of work, and I love that I get to share it with people like you and all your fans.
Awesome.